Hey guys, I've got something absolutely crazy for you in today's video, guys. I've got something absolutely crazy for you today in this video, guys. We're gonna be taking a look at this ridiculous, crazy videos I found on the internet by someone who calls themselves Dotesmite. Dotesmite what? What's a dote and what are they about to do, eh? What's a dote and what might they, what's so mite about, is dotes a type of mite, the little insects that run around on your skin? Cool. Let's get into today's video, guys.
The lowest resolution rating system is a binary one. You can simply...
This bitch asked me some about the whole dope. Young Bass God came in with the modo. 5 in the bitch and you know I'm gon' robo up and I'm riding up slow-mo.
I started by abstracting from the system I have already defined when it comes to rating things from a 1 to 10 scale. In essence, my system is based on 3 assumptions. The first is that all media is distributed on something resembling a bell curve in terms of how much I will enjoy it.
Did you catch that? Because it's the first logical fallacy in the video. This assumption is completely incorrect. Oh, by the way, the rest of the video, the mucho texto bit, it's good. If you're not already, go subscribe to Dotesmite, link in the description. But anyway, the Dotesmite's channel is good. This is the first logical fallacy. Could be called an example of survivor bias, because yes, while all media may or may not be, we can make the assumption that all media is rated on a bell curve. There is a difference between all media and all media which I will consume, because the chances are you're not going to watch something which you already know you're not going to like just from the description. If for example, there's no way I'm going to go out of my way to watch Attack on Titan Season 2. I didn't really enjoy Season 1 very much. I know I'm not going to like Season 2. So yes, all media may be on a bell curve, but the media you will actually watch is going to tend towards goodness because you have a good idea of your own taste. Therefore, we come up against the problem. Is the average in your rating scale the average of all media, or is it the average of media you yourself have watched? If we take the first option, this contradicts with Dote's other assumption, which is that you can't rate media that you haven't finished because you haven't had the complete experience. Don't worry, we'll be getting back to that and including some clips from videos. We'll talk about complete experiences later and why that's wrong. But if we assume that that's correct and that you shouldn't rate something unless you've had the complete experience, well, in that case, we can't, even if you don't, you can't rate something that you haven't had any experience of. So, therefore, we can't have the average be a perceived average in all media, including all media I haven't consumed myself. It has to be an average in media I have consumed. Therefore, what would be in the middle of your scale would probably actually be semi-good. It would probably be maybe a 7 out of 10 if we have a presumed average of all media. Well, we can't presume the average of all media, so a 5 out of 10 would be the average in media you have consumed, which would tend towards goodness because you're more likely to watch something which you think you're going to like, unless you're completely insane and you just watch random shit which you know you're not going to like. You can't make a rating scale based on a bell curve because it doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. You have a tendency towards goodness.
But here we arrive at the question of whether or not you should rate things that you don't finish. This brings us to a greater philosophical question on rating scales. Should you rate the total whole of something, or break a whole down to smaller pieces to rate those individual pieces?
This seems like a harmless statement, and it would be a harmless statement if Dotesmite had not made a follow-up video, and you will see why that follow-up video makes this a far from harmless statement. Here's some clips from that follow-up video.
Now here's an important factor to this equation, right? Because no thank you here, that fascist bastard, no thank you, who doesn't like my arbitrary numbers, has this thought, right? Has this thought that like, he likes anime that make him think, he likes things that make him think, he likes things that leave a lasting impact. I personally am not that minded towards the lasting impact, right? I'm a momentary fucking pleasure person, right? If I'm enjoying the anime in the moment, I don't really need to think about how fucking retarded it is back in fucking retrospect. I'm only thinking about how I'm enjoying it in the moment I'm watching the anime, right? It's fucking obvious to me. Right? But this system can accommodate for people like no thank you, who fucking like things in retrospect, right? Because if something leaves an impact, that's time spent, right? You spent the time, right? You spent, like, I don't know, 8 hours on watching Evangelion, 10 hours of watching Evangelion. I don't fucking know how long Neon Genesis Evangelion is. You spent 10 hours on watching Eva, and you thought about Eva for like 30 hours, and you really enjoyed thinking about Eva, so it's a 10.
So you're telling me that I should include the time I spend after consuming the text, thinking about the text, in my overall rating of said text. Hold on a minute. Doesn't that mean that the text is never really whole? Because you can extrapolate infinitely the external factors such as time spent thought about it afterwards into your rating scale. So how could you ever rate the whole anime? In that case, if you can't ever rate the whole text, then why even bother making the distinction between finishing the text and not finishing the text? If you finish the text by just seeing it once, well, who's to say that you've really finished it? Maybe it's one of those really deep things. Okay, let's take, what about one of those things that has an epic twist at the end that changes the movie, man? Like Fight Club, for example. Everyone knows the twist in Fight Club, so I'll just spoil it because I don't how old is that fucking movie anyway? So the twist in Fight Club that Tyler Durden isn't real and they're both the same person, right? And then you go back and watch the movie once you finished it, once you know the twist, and now you're like, oh, that scene makes more sense now. So that's how that scene is framed. So did you finish the text the first time you watched it? Or are you only just now finishing the text the second time you watched it? Or what if, oh wait, the third time I watched Fight Club, I noticed this little detail that I didn't notice the third. Oh, it's almost like you can never actually finish a text. Because as Carla has just explained, that even after you finish the text, your time spent thinking about it can be held on an equal level of equal importance to the time spent actually watching the text. So why would you say you can't rate something you've dropped if at the end of the day everything is dropped? Every single text you've ever seen, everything you're rating is at some point dropped. Or, if it's not dropped, it's incomplete because you haven't stopped thinking about it yet. And Carla isn't stupid. Carla knows we live in a world after the post-structuralists figured out how media works. Carla knows very well that the context a media is in is equally important to the text itself. She even mentioned this earlier in the video when talking about the difference between rating an album and rating a single. That when you're rating a song from an album, you need to take into account how it affects the album. Well, what about external factors? So, for example, what about the rest of an artist's discography? Should you rate an album in the context not only of itself, but in the context of the artist's discography? What about in the context of the genre it's a part of? Have you even finished an album if you haven't listened to every single other album in the genre? Have you even finished Kill Bill if you haven't watched every single film that Kill Bill references? Have you even finished any anime if you haven't watched every single anime, talked to every single director, listened to every single musician who worked on that anime's entire discography and all of their inspirations? You can extrapolate forever. Have you ever watched an anime, really, if you don't understand the exact political environment in Japan when that anime was made? And can you say you understand the political environment when it was made unless you understand the history of that political environment? And if you want to understand the history of a political environment, you're going to have to understand a lot more about world history. So, for example, you can't understand, Japan's current political environment unless you have a good understanding of World War II history. And you can't understand World War II history unless you understand what led to it, which would be World War I and stuff like that. And you can't understand World War I unless you understand previous things, for example, the French Revolution. And you can't understand the French Revolution unless you understand what's it called, the 7 Years' War? I don't know much about history, but do you see where I'm going? You can never finish a text, so there can't be any distinction between a text that you finished and a text that you haven't finished. Everything is always unfinished because, as you said yourself, it's all rhizomatic. Everything is too interconnected to ever be finished because it's all flowing into each other. Can you say you finished something if you only watched the first season? No, you only finished the first season. But obviously, this isn't how language works. If I say I finished something, if I say, oh yeah, I finished that show yesterday. Oh my god, a ghost just knocked my fucking guitar over. Wow, that was weird. If I say I finished that show yesterday, you're not expecting me to mean I finished studying all the world and political history that would have led me to understand the current state in Japan when that anime was made, plus every single song and every single person's discography. You can't expect me to mean that. So, like, we have this colloquial understanding of finished versus not finished, but really it's a spook. It's the same way as saying, like, it's not really a meaningful word. So when you're trying to, like, you can use it in everyday parlance, but if you're trying to do maths to it, you can't. You can't do maths to it because maths has to be precise. There can't be any like, 3 could mean this in this situation, but 3 could mean this in this other situation. 3 has to always mean 3, unless you're a smart boy and you realize that maths itself has some imprecision built into it because 0.999 recurring is equal to 1. But I won't talk about that in this video.
Let's talk about the 2 principles that guide my rating scale, right? The 2 principles that guide my rating scale, right? So the first of these principles, this is the most important, this is the foundational principle. This is the principle of dopamine out or feelings out compared to the amount of time you had to invest in it, right? Compare how much feelings do I get from something in comparison to how much time I invested into it. This is my basic standard for rating, right? If I watched an anime for 8 hours in total, I enjoyed all of those 8 hours on average, like an 8 out of 10 amount, right? That's like an 8 out of 10 anime, right? To me, that's how it works for me, right? I might have enjoyed 1 episode a 2 out of 10 amount and 5 episodes a 10 out of 10 amount, but it averages out an 8 out of 10.
You have a base assumption, which I have seen no evidence for, plus your maths is flawed. Let's start with the base assumption. The media works on averages over time. That if you like one part of a show a 2 out of 10 amount and one part of a show an 8 out of 10 amount, then the average is a 2 or whatever, a 5 or whatever, right? Is that true? Is that how enjoyment works? Or are you just using that to allow you to put a number to something that shouldn't have a number? For example, Star Trek The Next Generation is my favourite TV show of all time, and yet, a good chunk of the show is trash, to the point where no one in the entire Trekkie fandom would argue anything different. I love Doctor Who, for example. A good chunk of the show is trash, but averages don't work with... You can't use averages to define art. Because art isn't experienced as an overall average. It's only experienced in individual moments. So the fact that there was a bit in Star Trek Season 1 that was really stupid doesn't take away in any aspect from my enjoyment of my favourite Star Trek episodes. Of, like, I don't know, the best of both worlds. The fact that the best of both worlds is amazing doesn't, like... No part of me while I'm watching the best of both worlds is thinking back on that shitty moment from season 1 that didn't make any sense, where no one cares about that, and it's got nothing to do with averages. It's just that both of these things can exist and be treated separately. There is no reason to combine them into an average. You're just taking away from the good bits and giving the bad bits too much credit. The fact that there's a good part of a show and a bad part of a show, there's no reason to assume that they should combine into an average. They can be just treated as separate things. You can simply skip the bad parts of a show when you're rewatching it and only watch the good parts, especially with an episodic series like Star Trek. It makes perfect sense. And almost everyone does. Almost everyone skips the bad episodes when they're rewatching Star Trek because there are so many shitty episodes of Star Trek. And yet, that does not in any way mean that Star Trek isn't an amazing show. It doesn't take away from the peaks of the writing. The fact that there are awful Star Trek movies, god-awful Star Trek movies, does not mean that the show Next Generation is made worse retrospectively. The show exists, the movies exist, the good episodes exist, the bad episodes exist. It all simply exists, and trying to put a rating scale on the entire thing is preposterous. And Dots even mentioned this earlier, that there are TV shows that are too long to rate as a whole, and yet somehow there's a solution to this and then doesn't give a solution. The solution is simply people manage it. People manage it by being incorrect. that doesn't mean it works. It's a bodge. It's a terrible, spooky, fucking nonsense way of dealing with your life, and you should categorize things based on concrete proof. Oh, how about you go into VNDB? Sure, you can sort by rating, but if you want to go and look for a visual novel, the chances are, well, the way I do it anyway, I would much rather look for a visual novel based on tags of what is actually in that visual novel, rather than something that is imbued onto it later. And that'll be the conclusion to this video, but I have a few more nitpicks I want to make, but my ultimate conclusion, fucking incomprehensibly genius IQ, 10,000 IQ point fucking conclusion that will dismantle any possible counter argument will come at the end of this video. But first I need to nitpick all these fucking stupid mathematical errors and shit, because I'm fucking autistic as fuck. I'm so fucking autistic. Fucking all this philosophical floozy woozy bullshit. Who fucking cares about that? Let's talk about a real subject. Mathematics. Let's talk about why your formula makes no fucking sense. Feelings over time. It seems to make perfect sense, but let's follow it to its logical conclusion. The feelings over time argument seems to be based on the idea that you are more likely to finish shorter things. For example, this seems to make logical sense. You're more likely, let's say you're watching something, you get 1/3 into it, and you think, this isn't really very good. How likely are you to finish it? Well, if it's a 3-minute long video, and you're 1/3 into the video, you're like, should I finish this? Well, you only have 2 minutes left. You're more likely to be like, yeah, okay, I may as well finish this. However, if you're 1/3 into a 3-season TV show, and you didn't like the first season, you're very unlikely to finish with the second 2 seasons, right? This seems to make perfect sense. However, if we go back to the first video, you'll see that your rating scale is based on your probability to finish something, right? Your rating scale said that things that are 9s and 10s have a 99% chance of being finished or 100% chance of being finished, and things that are 4 or below are very unlikely to be finished. So, following these two facts, we should see that on your AnyList profile, the things that are right at the top that have the highest ratings, the things that you're most likely to finish, would be shorter, and the things that are longer should be towards the bottom, because you're much less likely to finish something that's longer than something that's shorter. So something that's longer has to justify itself, has to justify its own existence for longer, has to have more feelings over more time. So things that are actually longer are held to a higher standard on this rating system. Things that are short can be worse because there is less time, so the integer that represents time is smaller. Therefore, for the same equal fraction, the denominator? I don't know what math is. Numerator, the top number, the feelings number, can also be smaller because the fraction will be equal, right? But let's see if the reality actually affects this. Let's see if you're actually using your own formula when you're rating things. So, according to these mathematical calculations, we should expect to see the Dotesmite anime list tends towards higher scores for shorter shows and lower scores for longer shows. Except, if we go onto Dotesmite's public AnyList profile, we can find plenty of examples which prove this completely wrong. For example, NHK Nyokoso. This show is 24 episodes long, 24 minutes each per duration, which would make 576 minutes, or 9.6 hours, right? 9.6 hours at a score of 95 means that it has to have an average score over all 9.6 hours of at least 95, right? Compared to, let's say, scroll down to a lower show, Alien 9, only 4 episodes, has a score of 39. So you're telling me that so because the show is much shorter, any slight improvement would have a radically larger difference in Alien 9 than it would on NHK, right? Because there is less content in Alien 9, any slight good thing would be more significant than in a longer show. However, and Alien 9 is a good show. I happen to know that those somewhat likes Alien 9 at the very least. And so, you're telling me there is that much of a difference, Alien 9 is that much worse than NHK, which is apparently almost perfect for the entire runtime. That sounds like you're completely misusing your own rating system, because there should be a bunch of shorts up here. It should be mostly movies or shorts or OVAs. Now there is an OVA up here, This is an OVA, right? And there is also, okay, so compare NHK 24 episode show to Lane, which is a 13 episode show. So this has twice as much work to do than Lane. So why is it only 2 points behind? It doesn't make any sense. Your own rating system doesn't make any sense. If you stuck to your rating system, you would have to have short shows at the top, or at the very least, we would see a trend. It would be statistically more likely to have short shows at the top. It's not like there would be no shows that could be that good through their entire runtime. That's not the point. There could be shows that were that good their entire runtime, but you would see the trend that at the top of your ratings there would be more short shows, movies, OVAs, stuff like that, and then the no matter how good they are, the shows that were decent or good would have to be somewhere around the middle because they would have to prove themselves so much over their longer runtime. But that's not what we see. It's almost like you never even stick to your own rating system. It's just something you have in your head because you like to think that you have an idea, but you don't have any idea. I just want to make perfectly clear what my problem with the maths here is. It's so that no one can possibly make any mistake. The problem is that time is a factor. So which means that any changes in emotion have a wildly different effect depending on the length of the show. So if you have something that's 3 minutes long and it has one joke, well, the amount of time you feel happy for that joke could be a whole minute, which means 1/3 of that show would be a very high rating. Whereas if you had a 25 episode show and you had the same joke in it, even though the joke is the same, equally as good, it would contribute only a very, very tiny amount to the show's overall rating, which means that longer shows have so much more hard work to do to get a high rating than shorter shows and movies, and yet that's not reflected in the data.
What's about average? What's about average? What would be about average? I know fucking Dora. Let's say random fucking anime. About average. You watched it. You enjoyed it consistently. Nothing about it stood out too much. You didn't get bored. Dora spent 8 hours in Dora. You got 8 hours of enjoyment, right? And it was decent enjoyment. It was completely average. It kept you from being bored. Let's say that this is the perspective you have towards Dora. Okay, that's a 5. In your mind, Naruto is more like Dora than Sword Art Online. So Naruto, probably a 4. Boom! That's how the fuck you figure out numerical ratings. Okay, let's say something comes along that you like more than Ava.
Circular logic. Let's say something comes along that you like more than Ava. How could you quantify if you like it more than Ava? You seem to have this innate ability to quantify things magically in the air. How the fuck am I supposed to quantify if I like something more than Ava? Maybe if it is a very similar show, maybe I can quantify if I like Razafon more than Ava because there are loads of comparison points. But I could like a show, I don't know, how am I supposed to fucking compare Gochumon wa Usagi desu ka to Evangelion? They attempt none of the same things. Oh, I can't even compare the soundtracks because the soundtracks are in such completely different genres. I can't say I like one more than the other because they're so fucking incomparable. One is like a classical like opera shit with like boom 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 boom, and one is like you know fucking how the fuck could I compare that? There's no like, let's say something comes along that you like more than Ava. How do I know if I like it more than Ava? You already know this. You have your rating system which tells you, but I don't have my rating system, so I can't decide if I like something more than Ava. Maybe if they're similar, I can decide it, but all I can decide is whether I like something or not on its own merits. I can't decide if I like something more or less than something because they're too fucking incomparable. Oh yeah, yes, chewing gum. Let's taste this chewing gum. Ah yes, this chewing gum. You see, this reminds me of Neon Genesis Evangelion. Yes, this reminds me a lot of that moment in Neon Genesis Evangelion when Shinji runs away to go live in a tent. Yes, this chewing gum is very similar to that scene. Therefore, that scene is an 8 out of 10. This chewing gum is an 8 out of 10. Nonsense! Would keep going, point by point, dismantling your entire argument. But I'm going to stop here because it's starting to seem a little mean-spirited. So I will end with a matter of preference, a matter of personal preference that is also objectively superior. And that is that, and we've already talked about this on Discord, this is for all the viewers at home watching. That is that a rating scale is a type of databasing. It is useful, as you indicated in your own video, in your first video, you talked about how the rating scale should be useful to you, not just to communicate with other people. And that's why it's okay to have a non-traditional rating scale. So there's a fucking bug there's a bug. I think I killed it. Anyway, that's why it's useful to have a rating scale, is to database for your own sake. Well, when it comes to databasing, the point is to database something that exists within the text, not something which you, as an observer, implant onto the text. If I am looking for something to read, like a visual novel, for example, I go on VNDB and I think, well, I'm going to want something that I know I'm going to like. So then I go on VNDB, I go into the tags section. Let me look it up right now so that I can use the current experience. I would go to the tags section. I would find a tag that I like. Let's see. I would like I would like to watch something with a character who, let's say, heroine's traits. Let's see. I want a visual novel where the heroine is I don't know, a cat girl. Okay, cat girl heroine. Now I have my database. Now I can see every visual novel that has a cat girl heroine in it, right? And now I can sort it by rating if I want to have a good idea of what would be the most popular. Oh, Steins Gate and Valhalla are right at the top. Oh, okay. Now I can sort it by rating. But that's a secondary thing. I would never personally sort by rating first. I would always go into something that exists within the text before I want to find out other people's opinions on it. And even then, half the time, other people's opinions are not to be trusted. So how am I supposed to... Since this just happens to be on a website that is a database which logs people's ratings of stuff, now I can use it. But if this is for a personal database, not for a big database of multiple people's opinions, why would I need a rating? I'm never going to want to find something... Like, I know what I think of something, I remember it. I remember what I think of it. So that's why I'm stringently anti-rating, and you should be too. Because ratings are something which you imbue onto a text rather than something which is already contained within it. And what's the point in databasing something which you already know? There's no point in categorizing how much you like something to a numerical value. That defeats the entire point of data. You're not databasing... Now you're no longer databasing the thing, you're databasing yourself. You're databasing your opinion of the thing, and you're doing it in an incomplete and unsatisfactory way, as has already been proven, because it's arbitrary, and all rating systems are completely arbitrary. Why do people rate out of 10 and not out of 12? There's no reason except that we use a base 10 system, right? So that's not satisfying for me to database. I need to database it on something that it actually exists within the text, not something I have made up to put onto the text. Why would I do that? I may as well database it on, I would rather database on how many times I see feet. I would rather database on how many times I see feet in an anime than on the rating, because at least that's something that exists, countable, that two people will see it and have the same answer. That's the point of science, my friend. That is the point of science, that two people can do it and have the same answer, and if they have a different answer, one of them's doing it wrong. Ratings are not science, they're arbitrary and subjective. They have no place in my fucking database. They're fine, you can do them, but don't shove them down my throat. Don't bring them anywhere near my kids, okay? The fucking databases. Alright, that's it. That's the end of the video. I'm sorry. Go subscribe to fucking Dotesmite. Really good channel. Go watch fucking Zenith. Zenith is a great video that you should all go watch. Okay, I was going to end the video there, but I had one more thought which I need to put out really quickly, because I have to squeeze Wittgenstein into here somewhere, right? So, the way rating systems work, our main disagreement is actually based on the fact that we're just playing different language games. That you, for some reason, think, or maybe I think that you think you're playing the language game of maths because you're using a numbered system. You're using a 1 through 10 or a 1 through 100, 0 through 100, whatever system. But what you actually mean when you rate something, it's not maths. Because a rating of like 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever, 3 is like a cloud of a concept. It's not the same thing as the mathematical number 3. And this is why I don't like rating systems, because you have to treat the word 3, the number 3, as a word instead of a number, which I don't like, because I like numbers to be numbers. Okay, I'm a traditionalist like that. I like numbers to be numbers, like back in the old day when numbers were numbers and words were words, but now numbers are words, and it's too confusing for me. So. Because you're not saying that when you say something is rated a 3 out of 10 or whatever, what you mean is that the 3 represents a family of concepts which correspond to a certain level of emotional satisfaction, right? Rather than normally when the number 3 would be, for example, a 3 out of, like a 3, let's say if you're rating the tensile strength of a material, that's a physical property of the material. Whereas when you say 3 in a rating system, you're using the word 3 not as a name for something, but as sort of a label for this family, for this family of concepts that represent the emotional content that would be a 3 out of 10, rather than that I don't like that. I don't like that vagary, because it's too use letters, not numbers. Okay, I know you can't because things won't let you, but imagine if you could use letters. Maybe that's my problem. It's just that they're numbers, and I don't like it when numbers aren't numbers. I want numbers to be numbers and not words. What if I used words for my? I'm gonna start fucking rating things as fucking A B C D E F G, and no one can fucking stop me.